year away from an ugly buyout and layoff period. We're all, of course, we're a year away from the financial collapse as well at that point. We can see print declining, and we don't really have solutions yet. We're still many years away at that point from charging for the website, which is now going very well. And I put my head down and I just tried to write a ton of stories, because in retrospect, that was the way to win them over and to show them I belonged there. David Carr, the media columnist, who I now have a great bromance with, I don't remember talking to him for at least a year, maybe 2 years, but definitely not for a year. I was a shy, maybe a little scared, definitely shy kid, and so I put my head down and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and I think I wrote 400 stories my first full year. I wanted to learn how to do it. I wanted to learn how to write a New York Times story, and I wanted to earn the right to be there. And I do think, even though people our age, 20-somethings, come into newsrooms with a lot to teach, a lot to offer, but we've got to earn the chance to teach. We've got to earn the right to teach. And so I don't think I went in knowing all that, but that's what ended up happening was, thankfully my desk was literally in the corner. Like I could kind of sit back, write, not do anything stupid on Twitter, just work hard and earn the right to be there and write bigger stories and have more fun. Yeah. Over here.
So going back to the entrepreneurial part of it, once you have a website, how do you effectively boost your visual identity and online visibility?
I do think there's sort of a snowball effect that happens. And of course, with a snowball, you help get it started. And then with little luck, it keeps going. And it builds on itself. And it builds on itself very nicely. I'm going to give a silly example real quick. Going back to the fiance for a sec. She's a novel coming out, an ebook in a couple weeks. And this was her first piece of press for it. And it was in the New York Daily News yesterday. And it was a little too sexual, probably, than we expected, because there's a lot of sex in the book. And but the point is, this now results in other press today, right? You get blog posts about this yesterday, other inquiries about press today. That is, in a very silly, simple way, the snowball effect. And I just mentioned it because it's top of mind, but by having that first press 2 weeks before the book comes out, it's going to spur other things on. Now, of course, then the question is, how do you get that first piece of press, right? And that's probably in many ways the hardest part. I mean, I had in college with my blog many, many, many months of quiet, boring blogging before anybody wrote about it and anybody noticed it. But when I was doing that, and this is going back to 2004 for a second, I started by emailing reporters I liked, anchors I liked, rival bloggers I liked or hated but wanted to get noticed by, and flag things for them all the time, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. Hey, just posted this great item, thought you might like it. Hey, just posted this crappy item, thought you might improve it. Give me a comment, make it better. And by getting in people's ears like that, not to annoy them, not too often, but enough, I think that built up some awareness of it, to the point where then people took it seriously. It does require some self-promotion. I wasn't shy about my traffic. I promoted my traffic records. I told people how well I was doing. And that's something that I think I learned from the master. Come on, website. That was going to be a great moment. It was going to cue right on time there. Let's refresh. This guy's been doing this for 20 years, right? Almost 20 years Drudge has been doing this. And yet, every month, by the way, that's really surprising. Every month, he promotes his traffic scores. And and he has it on the site every day. It's kind of like having a ruler out in the bathroom, but take a look at that. There it is. The numbers speak for themselves. You know what I mean? That's pretty impressive. And that's 18 years going, and he still wants you to know that he's as strong as ever. And when he has a record month, he puts it on the top of the site, sometimes in red, and lets people know, yeah, I still got it. So I do feel like I learned somewhat from that and from sites like that aren't shy about self-promoting when they do have something to promote. You don't want to be egregious about it, but there are, I think, times where that helps to let people know that you are building an audience, even if it's 100, even if it's 1,000. That's an audience, That's something to reckon with, and I'm trying to remember how low my traffic was in the beginning, but I've blacked it out because it's embarrassing. The point is that it was something, and it got that snowball going. So I do think it takes some proactive actions like that, sending out mass emails. These days, you would tweet to people that you wanted to have them see your work, but it gets that snowball going, I think, in ways that end up working. Other questions? Yeah.
Again, question from Twitter. Someone is wondering what has significantly changed about your job in the news since the Page One documentary. And also from Twitter, Jamie says hi.
She's probably going to bed right now, and I'm ignoring her texts.
She just tweeted me. I was about to tweet her back and say, isn't it bedtime?
Oh, yeah, she is, yeah. So just so you guys, she's a traffic reporter in New York City, so she gets up at 3:24 a.m. Eastern, so what is it now there? Like, it's going to be almost 9 o'clock. So it's actually past her bedtime. But I told her I would call her in the morning. And I just realized as I made my ruler joke that I'm going to get flack for that on Twitter, but that's okay. That's part of the fun of it. How has it changed? How's my career changed since Page One? That's the question, right?
Yeah, like you're not like your job, like what you do. How has that changed since what you saw on Page One?
My job is basically the same. I think I probably have a little more autonomy, and I can write a little bit more, of the stories that I want to write, and fewer stories that are assigned to me. I just want to pull up my topics page real quick and try to think of a good example for you. You look at this stuff, and it's almost all digital media. It's almost all about future of distribution and future of news, and not about old-fashioned TV shows and things like that. And maybe that's changed as well, is that I'm more interested in all of that. But I would say my job is basically the same. The characters in the movie are basically the same. Bruce is still my editor. Carr is obviously still, there and stronger than ever. There's a line in the movie where he says that I'm a robot that's out to kill him, and if so, I'm a terribly programmed robot. And one of the most fun things for me about being there is getting to talk to him about his columns and brainstorm column ideas and things like that. That's a lot of fun. But I would say there haven't been a lot of changes since then. Back there.
What are some publishing
Publishing tools. What's an example of a publishing tool?
I guess just like tools like
I think of something like Topsy, which just came to mind, where it's got to go to archive of tweets going back years. And I find this to be very useful when I want to go back and search in time, for old tweets. I can't think of a good example, but you can dig deep into the archives on there in a way you can't do on Twitter. In terms of social networking sites like Tumblr, I use Tumblr, but I don't know what the best uses are for journalism with it. It's worth, I think, pointing out that Twitter might be overly hyped, sometimes. And I say that because I love it. I'm addicted. You see me refreshing right now. But sometimes it can end up being a media chat room. Sometimes it can be too insular. And I think as users of it, we have to guard against that and make sure that we're not just talking to each other, that we're reaching out wider and not just, because it's fun to be in a chat room. AOL chat rooms in the 90s were fun, although I was probably too young to be in them. IRC chat rooms are fun. Now Twitter's a chat room. It's great, but we want to make sure we use it beyond that. And so I find myself reminding myself of that once in a while. I'll think about other tools. Ask me again after, and I'll see if any other ones come to mind. Yeah.
What are some of like your favorite apps that you use in order to stay organized or just one time do stuff or even
Let's see. Well, I know what I should be using, which is Circa, It's one of the most talked about, most interesting mobile news things out there. And for those of you who haven't downloaded it, it's worth downloading because it makes you think about how should news be packaged on your phone. What should be different about this screen than about tablets or definitely computer screens. So I don't look at that as much as I should, but I do have it, and I think it's important for that reason. I think Newsy, frankly, was an eye-opening thing for me today for the same reason. Gets you thinking about how video should be different for mobile than it should be on television. What else do I use? Gosh, I use Uber a lot. That's a cab service. I use, well, you know what I use? Candy Crush. That's what I use too often. I think I've spent about $80 on Candy Crush, which is, I'm really sorry I said that. But those are the ones that come to mind. I wish I used a lot more apps. I've mentioned this example before this week, so I'm sorry if I repeat myself, but I'd really like to have an app that would be running in the background so that when I land at the airport in a new city, the phone lets me subscribe to the local paper. And really, really easily. The key with these things is to make it easy. You know, I'm sure right now I can find a way to subscribe, to a paper here. But I would love for it to know and be smart enough when I land to say, hey, Brian, welcome to Columbia. Would you like to read the Missourian? Would you like to, and to go on from there. I use Foursquare sort of for that because it's a great city guide when I get to a new place. But I would love for there to be more news applications like that know me. I mean, for example, as I've established by now, I'm really interested in the election tonight. I'm wondering what's going to happen. I'm surprised there aren't more apps that know me well enough to alert me just to the races I care about. Now, I know I could go in and customize it, and I could tell a website to alert me, but I'd like it to know me. It goes back to that quote, if the news is important, it will find me. I'd like more news to find me. And if I had any idea how to develop apps, that's what I would be developing. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, paywalls have kind of stopped that from happening in the fact that, like, if you have the AP News app, you can't get Columbia, Missourian on there anymore, from what I understand.
It's interesting.
And so I guess, what is your thought on that then, if you want to have like,
Well, let's broaden way out for a second. I do think that I do subscribe to the belief that you'll hear from many other people as well, that advertising revenue is going to continue to diminish as an overall part of the revenue for non-television news. Non-television news means New York Times all the way to BuzzFeed, right? That spectrum of non-television news. Television is a unique thing, right, that is much, much healthier than the newspaper economy, the newspaper market, and in some ways even the digital news marketplace. So forget television for a second. But advertising is going to continue to shrink as a proportion of what pays our paychecks. Subscriber revenue, other revenue like conferences will continue to increase in order to offset the declines that we experience in advertising because, there's too much inventory. There's too many pages on this World Wide Web for us to be able to sell ads that are as expensive as there are in print. And you guys probably already know that. I mean, we got some beautiful ads on this site. I'd love to live there. I never will. But in terms of what's gonna keep this thing up and running and ticking, and what's gonna pay me to write for it, it's gonna increasingly be subscriber revenue. It's gonna increasingly be, right there, just 99 cents for 4 weeks for nytimes.com. I'm really thankful, though, that the Times figured out a way to make this site mostly free and allow people through the door 10 times a month, sometimes more, to read articles, to watch videos, and then to hit you up for money only when we've seen that you're really into us. It's like asking you on a date only after you seem interested. It makes a lot more sense. It's logical, and we see this model, of course, being applied now at smaller papers all across the country with varying degrees of success. And by varying, I mean it's not working in a lot of places. I am glad they're trying, but it is not working in a lot of places. And I don't know what the ultimate answers will be. I hope that newspapers at least maintain this notion of partly free, partly accessible to everyone. Like right now, the LA Times, for example, has a less porous paywall. And I think there's 7 times this month where I've tried to read stories. That's an advertisement. Where am I? Jesus Christ. So on this browser, of course, it works because I haven't loaded articles in this browser before, but you go on my laptop, every time I hit the website, I can't read the articles because I've hit the cap. It seems like a very tight cap. And yet I still haven't paid, so I'm part of the problem. And I don't feel particularly bad about that because I pay for a lot of news already, and I'm going to continue to do that. But there's limits for everybody, and there's financial and economic limits for everybody. So I don't know what the real ultimate answers are. I hope that we at least have partial free access on these sites in the future. And I hope that these sites figure out much, much easier ways for me to pay. Let's just for fun. And I'm not trying to pick on the Times because I love this place. But let's see how easy it is. Continue. First of all, I had to read all that. I got to fill out all this, information. I got to get out my credit card. There's only 2 pages, 3 pages for me to click, but it's going to take me a few minutes to sign up. Yeah.
All of you who are journalism students at the university.
Get it for free.
Yep. If you don't already know what the login and password are for students here, see one of your professors. You can get that for free through the journalism school library.
And then go to nytimes.com/media. No! Just kidding. nytimes/pages/business/media. Absolutely. And you can go and read all of our stories, including 4 that I wrote on campus this week. It's been a busy week, and all of that. The 60 Minutes thing is a really, really interesting story. I want this to be open and accessible, but more importantly, I want it to be really easy to pay for. And that form is not the hardest thing in the world, but paying with my phone would be easier. Pointing, this is just a fantasy, so forgive me for a second. Walking up to a New York Times print copy and paying with my phone, just pointing my phone at it and paying, like that would be easier, right? I don't think it's that people are unwilling to pay at all. It's that they want it to be easy. And I think a lot of the innovation the next few years will, I think and I hope, be around that. By the way, and I don't know if anybody in the world agrees with me, I wouldn't even mind it being bundled with my wireless bill or my cable bill. I wouldn't mind if 25 cents of my AT&T subscription went to the New York Times. Now, I know I might be the only person that feels that way because your bill's high enough. But what I mean is there's got to be creative ways to figure out how to pay because a lot of news is going to require a payment in the future. But I do think a lot of it still won't, and I think there will be, hopefully, these flexible models that allow some access. I'm sorry it's not a better answer because we don't know yet. Other questions? Yeah.
Is there ever a time where a plethora of social media is bad for journalism?
Well, I want to just change the terms slightly. I think the focus on social media and the misuse of it can definitely be bad for journalism. I don't want to blame the tools because Twitter inherently isn't good or bad. Twitter is just a way to publish. Really, really easy way to publish. But if a bunch of reporters are on Twitter talking to each other and spreading the wrong facts and causing those facts to spread widely, then yeah, that is bad for journalism. We see this with every breaking news story now. We saw it last night in Paramus, New Jersey, when I go back to my hotel room and Anderson Cooper's on talking about this shooting at a mall outside New York City. I didn't see CNN make any mistakes last night, but I did see a couple of reporters from local stations tweeting saying that there were 2 injuries and they said the suspect had been caught at one point. These things weren't true. There were no injuries except for the gunman who had killed himself, and that wasn't known for many, many hours later. And that's just a little example. There's usually much worse, more egregious mistakes that are made. And sometimes those mistakes are made because reporters have easy access to publish, but I don't think that's the fault of social media. It's the fault of our own brains. And listen, we all want to be first. Hopefully we also all want to be right. And you guys have heard it before. You'll hear it 1,000 times again. People aren't going to remember if you're first. They are going to remember if you're wrong. So it is worth waiting a little before publishing. So that's where I think it can be bad. I think that the misinformation can be bad. The other issue sometimes for social media is that, like I said, it can be a chat room. It can be an echo chamber, and that might not be as prevalent in small towns as it is in big cities. But if you've got a lot of journalists talking to each other in the same location all day on Twitter, you can start to narrow your view and rather than widen it out. It's much better for me to use Twitter as an antenna, like a giant ear I can point in different directions so I can hear people I wouldn't hear otherwise. Because I'm going to hear my friends and my colleagues and my competitors at the bar anyway. I'd rather point it toward people I'm not going to hear otherwise. Yeah.
So New York Times established certain regulations on how journalists should use the social network. Like when you are doing reports, because you don't want this information to be seen first on Twitter, then on New York Times website, right?
You're right, and we've had to there we go, I got a new mayor. We've had to figure out how to do that. Let me open up my account real quick. I'm trying to think of a good example of this recently where I've had to be waiting for a link before I tweeted something, and I don't think I'll be able to pull one up right now, but whenever we have a good exclusive that we can't wait to share, these days we almost always wait until the story's online before we tweet it. And I think that's good for me, it's good for the New York Times, it's also good for the readers. I'm thinking about an example in January. I got this great tip, and I'm sorry if you guys heard this earlier, I'm going to repeat myself. On Christmas, this PR person called me. I'd never heard of him before. He was from a DC PR company that I also had never heard of before. He says, Brian, I got this great scoop for you. You're going to love it. We're going to hold it off for you. We'll have it in a couple days. He wouldn't tell me what it was about. And he calls me a couple days later. Brian, the story's been delayed, but we're going to have it for a couple days. And then a couple days pass. And then it's New Year's Eve. Brian, it's almost done. We're going to have it for you soon. New Year's Day. Brian, it's really close. We're going to tell you what it is soon. So obviously I'm getting kind of curious. I'm trying to figure out what this could be. It must be some kind of merger or acquisition. What could it be? So January 2nd rolls on, and a source of mine in Doha, Qatar, who used to work at Al Jazeera, says, Brian, I think Al Jazeera just bought Current TV. And I realized that's what the PR person's been calling about. He just can't tell me yet because the deal's not done. But that's what he's been calling about. Every other day, he's been preparing me for that story. So I dug around a little more and confirmed that was true. Started writing as fast as I could, terrified that people were on the same hunt, because this guy that called me, emailed me, he's got other friends in the press, got other sources, he could tell. So I'm writing as fast as I can, pounding out 5 paragraphs to get it up online. And it took forever, it felt like. It took 45 minutes to post it. It took what felt like an eternity. And the whole time I'm sitting there, wanting to hit publish on my tweet. But step back a second and you realize, if I published a tweet that said, breaking exclusive, this is my story, whatever it would say, Al Jazeera has bought Current TV, that's actually not very useful to my readers. It's a lot better to have a link, to send them to a story, to give them more than 140 characters. And sometimes our competitive instincts take over and we forget that people are just as interested in the second paragraph and the third paragraph and the fourth paragraph, and it's worth waiting, I think, 10, 15, 20, 45 minutes so that we can have a link and send traffic back to the site and give people more information. And I think there's very rare cases where that's not true. I mean, we all as journalists, well, maybe I'm the only morbid one here, but we all have that thought about how if we see something terrible happen, or if you're on a plane that's crashing, you're going to tweet, plane crashing, without calling the New York Times desk first, right? Although now that you can have phones on, while you're on the flight. So, of course, there's always situations where you're going to break it before you put it online. But I think for the most part, those scenarios don't really happen. The reality is that it's better to have a link. It's better to give people more information. And so I think that's where we come down on it, that for the most part, it's better to give the traffic to the place that employs you because, as my editor reminds me, Twitter does not pay me, right? Twitter does not sign my paycheck. Back here.
How do you find ways to disconnect online?
Disconnect. While not, yeah.
Meaning I'm sure you get a barrage of tweets throughout the day, there's stories you follow.
Yeah, I mean, on a very, no, I do. On a very basic level, if it's getting to that time of day where my editor's getting cranky because I haven't turned in my story yet because I'm half an hour late, I will get up and walk away from my cubicle and go into a quiet room and turn off my Wi-Fi and turn off the lights and finish the story and not allow myself any Twitter until I come out. But that's a very basic way. In a much grander way, when I was working on my book, it was due, the first draft was due in the end of September last year. Last year. And so, I worked on it all September. And I gave Jamie, my fiance, now famous in this conversation, my passwords. And she changed them, and she took the accounts away. She took Twitter away, she took Facebook away, she took Tumblr away. And I couldn't get the keys back till the draft was done. And if I had something really, really important, I'd break down, text it to her, and she would tweet it. But that was actually wonderful, and I highly recommend it. If you've got any big project, give your password away to somebody. Let them lock it up. It ended up being really good for me. I don't think I would have finished the book if I hadn't been locked away from that stuff. That ended up being really important. Yeah.
When you get that job and there's an outlet like something in print or something local TV, how do you get your bosses to buy into you building a digital identity or your station building their digital identity instead of just simply that one product like a local TV newscast or just the newspaper?
Yeah. I think in some ways, some television stations and networks are ahead on this because they're used to having personal brands. The personal brands are called anchors, right? And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Peter Jennings would have been great on Twitter. I think, because he was a personal brand. We just didn't have that term back then. But I realized that sometimes if we get beyond the $1 million anchors, there is resistance to having people personally publish and personally build up a following. I think that the way that we encourage that, the way we fight back against that resistance, is to show bosses, to show employers why it works, to show them case studies from elsewhere of why it's good for them. Examples of how reporters in other markets have built up followings that have drawn people back to the station, or to show them examples of traffic boosts that come when you're using your personal Twitter account to drive traffic. I think sometimes it takes not telling but showing these specific examples. And I know that's not a great answer because it's going to depend on every boss and every station and every paper. But I think there's something to be said for that. I don't want to call it hand-holding because that has a negative connotation. It's understandable that they need to be tugged along a little bit sometimes and to be shown why it works. But I think the fact of the matter is people watch people. People read people. People listen to people. They don't, yes, they do read the New York Times, but they're really reading a bunch of bylines of reporters who have worked all day to give them the news. And we're moving more in that direction, not less. So we sometimes have to show bosses why that is. Time for a couple more questions over here.
This is kind of a small question that's not applicable. However, I see that you have your phone number on Twitter. Why in the world do you do that?
That's a good observation. I used to have my cell phone number, and then for space reasons, and frankly, like personal reasons, I took it off. Not because I was getting weird phone calls, because I wasn't, but I just decided as I got a little older, you know what, if you want to get me on my cell phone, all you do is call that number. It tells you the number. So, if you really want me on my cell, you'll find me anyway. So I decided just to go with the work number. But why is it there in the first place? Why is it there at all? It's to send a message. It's so that you notice it. It's so that I appear to be open and transparent. Because honestly, people don't call that much. I mean, they don't. And I don't answer if they do because I'm not at that desk number very often. But it's the appearance of availability and of transparency. And that's not all entirely cynical. I mean, my email, I'm always on, and if I don't reply, I ask people to send it again in an hour, and I will eventually reply. It's a bad habit, but I eventually will reply. I want people to be able to send me ideas and corrections, really, corrections and compliments and obviously complaints and critiques. And I think that by having that up there, it's a way of appearing to be available. It's also a business card. I mean, instead of having a business card, I can say go to twitter.com/Brian Stelter and you'll find me. And so that's the other reason. When I did have my cell phone number up, I got about 1 weird call a month and about 2 worthwhile calls a month. So it actually, like, it was a good ratio of, okay, this is worth it. That 1 call is worth the 2 great calls. Usually. Yeah.
So, was it hard for you to transition from writing tweets and newspaper articles to a book?
It was. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done. I hope it's the hardest thing I ever do. I hope nothing's ever harder than this. I just, I can't help but pull it up because I think, you have to have like a flashy book site these days to sell a book. It was really hard to transition for a couple of reasons. I should first say what was easy. The reporting was easy. The reporting was so much fun. The researching, the watching old Today shows, and the wooing of sources, and the expensive lunches and dinners, and the bar tabs with sources, like the warming them up to me. All that was wonderful, and the running to the bathroom to take notes when I'm out with people was fun, and gathering all that information and figuring out what the book should feel like and say was wonderful. The only hard part, the reason why it was the hardest I've ever done, was just like the physical writing of the sentences, because you sit back and you think, okay, well, my average story for the Times that's on the front page or the business front page is 1,000 words. The book has to be 100,000 words. I have to write 1,000 of those. I have to write 100 of those articles. Not a math whiz. I have to write 100 of those articles, to get this thing done. And that is, it is, yeah. So anyway, I don't know what the number was, but it was terrifying to realize I had to write that much. Eventually, I broke it down to chapters, and it got a lot easier. But it was hard to transition, and beyond just the word count, what was hard was having to write in a narrative style, where people, you can't write a lead, right? You have to write the opposite. You got to start at the beginning. You got to pretend like people don't know that Ann Curry is getting fired. You got to pretend like people don't know that GMA is going to win and beat the Today Show. You got to pretend like people don't hate Matt Lauer at the end of it. And that was hard, because we're in the business of giving the most important information first. But thanks to editors, I was able to do it and figure it out. And then everything else was fun. Editing was fun. Fact-checking was fun. Adding stuff last minute was great because I'm a procrastinator. Promoting the book was fun enough. Begging people to review it for Amazon was fun enough. All of those things were great, but just the sheer writing. I do recommend it, though, because it does make you think differently about producing something. And it does make you think about reporting something over a long term. You write about TV, but if you're writing about a morning TV for a book, you have to live it every day for a year, and that kind of commitment was something that was interesting to experience. And I'm working on a paperback version now, so if any of you have strong feelings about GMA or the Today Show, come talk to me. I need ideas. Because I got to tell you, I haven't been watching as much morning TV this year. A couple more last questions? Yeah.
Another one from Twitter. When in the early days of TV Newser, how did you go about building an audience?
Sending it out to people helped, emailing competitors and rivals and anchors and stuff, and just self-promoting helped. But what really helped, and it was in the very first days, having links from just a few blogs. Jeff Jarvis's blog Buzz Machine linked to me the very first day. That gave me 1,000 views. They went to the site. Most of them left, never came back, but 100 came back, and then 200, then 300, and having links from just a few helped an enormous amount in the beginning. The other thing that helped was having that rating scoreboard, because it was consistent. It was like honey, it would bring people in every time. So those were probably the main ways. And I saw a hand up here. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about starting your first website and blog. You talked about how you started video games and what you're interested in, but you want to create an audience. So I don't know what your advice would be about what's more important to write about what you're interested in, or how to write an audience.
I think the best are the ones, I was really going to try to go into WordPress, but it's not going to happen. I think the best are the ones that are a combination of those two things you said. They are a combination of something you really care about and something that other people care about. That and I gave an example in one of the classes earlier, so I'm going to repeat myself again. If I was starting today, I probably wouldn't start a blog about TV news because it's too broad. I'd probably do one about Fox or about Al Jazeera, something narrower and more manageable. But think about it this way: Fox News has 1.2 million viewers at any given time of the day. So that tells me there's a big audience for something I'm interested in that they're interested in. And so it's kind of like a Venn diagram, right? Of your interests, others' interests, and the good stuff is in the middle there, where you can build an audience of people. It doesn't have to be big, but some audience of people that really care about it. I think that's one way to think about it. And did you have a question too? Maybe if it's a good question, it'll be the last one. No pressure, but...
I was just wondering, while you were kind of in the planning stages of your book, do you have any, I guess, commitment issues with what you originally kind of set out to write and during that process?
Tell me what you mean by commitment issues.
Like, whenever you went in, did you know, okay, like this is the story that I want to tell, and how did the story change?
Oh, interesting. Oh my gosh. Definitely. I mean, for one thing, I signed the book deal before Ann Curry was fired. And I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I didn't realize that the Today Show was going to lose for the first time in 17 years to Good Morning America. I didn't realize that Today was going to be dumb enough to kick an anchor out and make her cry. And I was in denial about how bad it got at the Today Show. Even though I was reporting it and even though my sources were whispering crazy things in my ear, two things happened. One, I was in denial about what had happened, about how bad it was. And two, and this sounds silly, I'd already written a first draft and I didn't want to rewrite it all. I had this beautiful lead. I'll tell you about it briefly. The opening of the book was, I thought, so great. May 22nd, 2012, overnight at Good Morning America. It's 12 a.m., it's 11:30 p.m. The show's on 7 hours, and the overnight producer gets a phone call from LAX. There's a dog on the tarmac, and he can't get the dog to New York for the morning show. The dog is some stunt dog. He stands on things or something. His name is Matty. You can YouTube him. And this was going to be a big deal on GMA, and the dog wasn't allowed on the flight. And I hear this producer. I'm sitting there hanging out there for the night. He blew my mind. All the different tactics he tried to get that dog on the plane. Well, let me get out my frequent flyer number on Delta. It was his dad's, and then he tries the, well, what if I put the dog in a seat? If I buy a ticket for a human, put the dog on the. He said literally, what if I dress the dog up in a raincoat? He said, he had all these great ideas. I mean, it was so impressive. It was like watching a master at work, but about morning show stunts. And I really wanted to lead the book with that because that's morning TV, fun and crazy and yet important and newsy and all that at the same time. And I had that lead, and I had written it, and it was wonderful. And it wasn't until 4 months after Ann got fired that I realized I have to start with Ann. The book is Ann. I mean, the book is the Today Show. I couldn't, but it was such a bummer because I had committed, to use your word, I committed to that lead. I committed to that way of going into the story. As a viewer of the Today Show, since I was 10 years old, and as a fan, I didn't want to acknowledge how bad it had gotten. But I had to. I mean, that's what readers wanted. They wanted to know what happened. They wanted to read about the dog on the plane, but I had to get them to that point by starting with the story they knew. So it was hard, and frankly, it required the book editor to, shake me, and not physically, but shake me out of my original plans and force me to try a different way. And I'm so glad he did. So now I get to add one more chapter at the end for the paperback version. It's weird because nothing's really happened this year. The Good Morning America is still winning, Ann's still missing. The Today Show is trying to come back, and it will come back someday, which will be a great book for me. People love a winner. They love a story, they love a comeback story. But there hasn't been a lot of development, so I won't have much to add, unfortunately. But I am hoping to add a chapter about CBS This Morning because it's the newsier morning show. It's the alternative. I mean, it's like New Day on CNN and Morning Joe on MSNBC. It's the newsier morning show, and its ratings have increased. So whenever you get bummed out, if you're worrying that people care too much about cat videos or other fluffy stuff, there's lots of evidence actually all around that people are also tuning in for real news and are interested in that as well. That makes me hopeful anyway. I think I will wrap up there. I'm happy to answer more of your questions afterwards one-on-one. And if you're shy, tweet me, and I'll reply later or tomorrow or something. But thank you guys for coming.